Hello, and welcome to Bias, Not Biased, a podcast for tough conversations, where we talk about biases in the tech industry and how to overcome them. These conversations focus mostly on BIPOC, LGBTQ, mental health, disability, accessibility, but the idea is to have all form of inclusive, equitable design. Today we're going to talk to Jay Demetillo. Jay has been working with design for over 10 years. He's worked in New York City, San Francisco, and Singapore. He's worked for companies like Twitter, Pinterest, Yahoo, and Grab. And let's talk to him and hear about everything he has to share. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. I do usually is I start by saying, and now Jay Demetillo, Jay Demetillo, right? I'm correct?
Yes.
Or just Jay, or just Asian Jay. What do you want?
Just Jay Demetillo is fine.
Okay. All right. And now, Jay Demetillo. How you doing, Jay?
Hey, how you doing, man? How's what time is it over there? It's like 11.
It's 11 here, yeah. Sydney.
Oh wow. You must have been up late night, right? The Socceroos won. It was crazy. I saw videos.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they won. I haven't been keeping up with the World Cup. I'm gonna tell you something. I'm a very bad Brazilian that way. I'm a Brazilian that loves basketball.
That's awesome though. Yeah.
I'm in the right place. I can watch the NBA in the morning. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I watch all the games, just put them on the computer here. It's perfect timing. Never had a better time watching the NBA than in the morning while doing work. It's just brilliant.
I feel you, dude.
What's your time zone, Jay? You didn't even, yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's SGT in Singapore, but I think it's like +8 GMT or something like that.
Oh my God. So, all right. So let's get back to the beginning. Tell me where you're at. Tell me where you work. Tell me, give me a little bit of an intro here, Jay.
Yeah, so I'm in Singapore currently. I'm originally from the States. I work at a company called Grab. A lot of people are like, what's Grab? So Grab is pretty much a super app that does a lot of things. Very similar to Uber, but does a little bit more where they can do ride hailing, food delivery, express deliveries, Mart, and then they also have a payments system as well, which is wild, a digital wallet. So yeah, I think it's a super app, right? And it's very popular out here in Southeast Asia. But a lot of people, outside of Southeast Asia probably don't know it unless you're like super into the tech community, right? So yeah.
Right. Oh man, I mean, the funny part is you mentioned all of that, and all I could think about is, didn't I hear about something about Twitter wanting to be a super app that does exactly all of that? Wasn't that the whole point
Oh
of
my
buying
gosh.
Twitter?
It's funny. Can I give you history on that?
Go
Because
ahead.
I used to work at Twitter back in the day, and I was there when they acquired Vine, and then they had Periscope, right? So I always thought the vision of what Twitter was gonna be was like a WeChat, but
Right.
turns out Elon's trying to do that again, but terribly. So we'll see what happens.
I
I
love the
wanted to,
terribly. It's really
yeah,
good.
it's so bad. But yeah, it's really sad. I wish we had turned into a super app before this, because I feel like Twitter would be in such a different place maybe like 10
Yeah.
years ago.
No, I know. It's so crazy, right? That's where we're going. We don't have super apps in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm just it's surprising because I've worked with Asia, like Booking.com was in Asia when I
Yeah.
worked in Booking.com. They were starting out, and everyone was talking about WeChat and about, well, you can do all these things in WeChat, and you can do payment, and I can send you money, and I can do this, and we're like, oh, well, maybe WhatsApp's gonna do this, and WhatsApp didn't do it, right? Which is still
Yeah.
surprising. And now Twitter as the way to do it sounded even more surprising to me, but you know, um, so I mentioned Twitter. You worked on Twitter. We actually met on Twitter,
We met
right?
on
And
Twitter.
we
Basically. That's right.
and we met on Clubhouse a lot, and we kept talking on Clubhouse. I'm gonna tell a funny story here. I was in a conference in Melbourne a couple of weeks back, maybe almost a month back, and I hear this voice on stage, and I'm like, I know this voice, but I don't know where I know this voice from, and it's from Clubhouse. I knew you from Clubhouse and I knew the voice, but I didn't know that that was you because it said on the thing, it just said like Jason Demetillo. And I'm like, I don't know who Jason Demetillo is. I know Asian Jay.
And you were shocked.
Oh, I was
You were
shocked. It was
shocked.
super fun. But people love the talk. I would love if you can touch a little bit on that story. Your talk is about joining a company in Asia, coming from the US, breaking the barrier of cultures. And this is what I love to talk about on the podcast. How do you, how did you end up in that scenario talking about it here in Melbourne?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think for me, right, I've done a similar talk, but I never went into the whole gatekeeping and inclusion part for a bit because I think I was a little bit nervous about talking about it. And in general, that was something that I actually got comfortable talking with because I kept talking about on Twitter Spaces actually with you and a few other folks. So I think a part of it
Here's Tom's.
is talking about more and more, right? Yeah. And yeah, jamming with people that understood where I was coming from because I couldn't find that in a lot of places. So I think it's very, oh my God, my dog. Sorry about that.
It's all
You're gonna
good.
have to
Don't worry
edit that
about it.
out. But like it's hard because like I was saying in the talk, you have to find the people that you can really vibe and trust that they come from that background of understanding and empathy. And to be honest, right, the design community right now, they're not very good at showing empathy towards other designers, especially international designers, as you know. And there isn't like a space for international designers to really talk about these things because I feel like and no pun intended, it's like a little bit whitewashed, right? In a way where
100% is.
uh it's very unsettling for me or people like you or our common friend Chris Toms. Shout out to Chris Toms. It's unfortunate because it really doesn't speak to the impact of what design can do. Uh, when a lot of the folks that are getting the microphone are in the West, in these big companies, and they're very blind to a lot of the things that we have to deal with internationally.
I'm with you. I think it's there's a Eurocentrism, right? And the weird part is we use the term Eurocentric a lot to describe this, but it's actually Silicon Valley centrism in a way, where we have all these, white male corps, of Silicon Valley that are just, yeah, it's really hard to break through, right? We were discussing this yesterday at work. We were having a talk about diversity and design, and one of the things that came up, which I think you were gonna enjoy, 90, no, not 97%. 97% of graphic design is white, but 73% of design is white, which is crazy, right?
Mhm.
And so the weird part there, I found the page that has like measurements of all these different, races and ethnicities and minorities, and it said something around maybe 30% were women and 5% were Latinx. Uh, Asian wasn't there, Jay, on the page. There was no measurement.
Yeah,
And that surprised me because the world population is very Asian.
it's very
Like,
Asian.
I mean, just the numbers, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
weird. I don't understand that. Again, I want to know who wrote these numbers. We should write an angry email to these folks. That's unfortunate. I mean, I did something very similar when I called out the whole Asian leaders number in Silicon Valley. It's also, I think, pretty low as well. There are not a lot of Asian leaders, and that's, no offense to the South Asians from India, they're killing it. But like the Southeast Asians, uh, even folks in the Asia, China, Japan, Korea, we don't see a lot of them in leadership positions. And I forget the number right now. I don't want to like misinform people, but it's pretty low, especially in Silicon Valley companies as well. And I can only name like a handful of people that are from Asian descent that are like up there, like what is it? The guy from Webflow, David Hong, I think, right? Is it
Yeah.
David? Yeah, David's a good
Yeah.
dude. Wendy Johansson, right? She's also amazing. Uh, and I think I can't really name any. Oh, John Maeda. I mean, that's another
John Mayer.
person.
I was gonna say that's the only one I have in my list too.
Yeah, and there aren't really a lot. And it sort of it irks me because like I mean when I talk about it in the talk, there aren't enough role models, just not just for Asians, right? But
Yep.
Latinx, right? You don't see a lot of role models out there that are like representing Latinx. I'm sure they're out there, or they don't really speak that much, right? And it's weird. It's really weird.
That's the whole reason why I started the podcast, because I was noticing exactly that, right? It was who do I look up to? Where are the people that like look, I grew up in design a long time ago, right? So when I started, we have, Jeffrey Zeldman, Eric Meyer, a bunch of people that were building the web in the starting of the start of the web, right? And it's all cool. Like I still look up to these guys and I feel like it's amazing. But now, like almost 20 years in, I'm thinking, where are the books from the Latin designers, and where are the books from the Black designers, and where are the books from the Asian designers? We need to talk about them. Like, yes, John Maeda has a bunch of books, but where are the other ones, right? How can we learn to share all of this? And here's where it really, like, I don't know. I think you use the word irk, but I think I hit this point where I was like, what inspires me to still be in design today, right? And this became the thing where it's like talking to people like you and talking to people like Chris and talking to people like, the people that I've been talking to for interviews. This is a thing that I love, and sharing their stories and making, like, creating this opportunity for representation. But then it became a question of trying to know, like, what inspires these people to be in design. So what inspires you, Jay? What
Oh
inspires you
man,
to still be in design today?
that's a good question. I think for me, right, like there's two sides to it. I think for me, what inspired me to come to Asia was just my roots. I really wanted to give back to my community, especially the Philippines, Southeast Asia in general. Then that's why I joined the company out here in the first place, right? I mean, there's a bunch of other reasons, but I think that was the number one reason. Like I didn't really want to work in the States when I started seeing like a ceiling there and not seeing enough representation. And a lot of people said like, well, you ran away from that. I didn't really run away. I wanted to just try something else different. And I use this analogy. I told I think Harrison Wheeler on his podcast is like, it's like as if you're Cristiano Ronaldo, you played in Series A Italian League, you want to try a different league, you want to go Premier League, right? And try out your talent there. You may want to go to, I don't know, Middle East now, right? Or the Paris League, right? To try out and see how good you are there. So I wanted to see like how I could do out here in general and really see where my skill sets are and how I could grow. And I think the fact that I could come out here and not just evolve my career, but also just to bring a voice to the tech community out here is really important, especially the design community, because there aren't a lot of people that speak about it in general. I can only think of like maybe one or two people that you can think of in Southeast Asia that really speak out about the design community out here, which is really sad. And then on the second part of it is I ended up starting a podcast where I actually talked to folks in not just design, but the communities, specifically in Myanmar, just to see how tech impacted their lives. So for me, right, like I wanted to bring awareness to these stories of how people were brought up in a world where, they were developing, and it was a developing country. There's that started seeing all this new technology and how their lives adapted to it, how they grew up with it, and what that looked like when all this information and technology came to their fingertips, right? The podcast is called Traces. You can check it out. The few episodes in the beginning were pretty rough because I was learning everything by myself, but now I have someone helping me out. But yeah, it really goes into the whole like how are humanitarians working, and how did humanitarians work with people in villages to show like their computer and tell them like this thing will do all this for you. And just to see that interaction or hear those stories is fascinating, right? So I think it's just bringing awareness to how tech does impact lives, not just from this Western standpoint, but just to see it from a cultural standpoint. I think that's really important.
I love that you plugged the podcast there. Very good. And that you have someone helping you. Mine is still rough because I don't have anyone helping me.
Yeah.
Um, but we joke, but I mean, I wouldn't mind if your dog is barking or whatever. This is an open conversation that is, like supposed to show you who you really are. And if someone barks or someone shouts in the background, that's all good. Um, Look, I love that story. That inspires you. But what it made me think about was you mentioned like how these people got introduced to technology and how they got introduced to this and how they changed their life. I would love to know from your beginnings, right? So how did you connect to design to begin with? What was little Jay growing up, and how did he all of a sudden realize like this is what I want to do? I want to be a designer. How did that happen?
Oh man. So back in the day, right? I think you and I think very similar generation where we didn't grow up with computers. I didn't get a computer until I was like what, uh 15, 14, something around that age, and I wasn't allowed to play with it, right? So a lot of my creativity was like literally like illustrating, and I read a lot of comics. I read a lot of comics when I was younger. So I actually wrote or drew a lot of comics, but I also wrote my own crazy like little like J-verse comics and whatnot. And I had like probably like 12 books of like this crazy comic I wrote when I was younger. So that's where all the creativity was going. And then once I figured out like Microsoft Paint and all these weird programs on the computer like I could play with art wise, I started playing around. And then like of course like I won some art competitions in school, nothing to brag about. It was just like high school type of.
Brag about it, bro. Brag about it.
It's
Come
all
on.
right. I mean, it wasn't special. I didn't get first place. It's like second or third, which is fine. I don't care. But like, even when I went to university, I really didn't want to major in art. I think for parents of different cultures, they want you to go into medical fields. They want you to have a stable job. Of course, me being Filipino is like the nurse, right? Or doctor, dentist, or whatever. And like because most of my family was in healthcare, so for me like I actually just was like, nah, I want to be a teacher. I want to teach history. That was like my first major, and then I switched to creative writing, and then I switched to robotics, which was crazy. And then like we were doing a coding class because they actually ask you to code in this robotics class, right? And we had to build a website. And then one of the folks in the class was like, why are you doing robotics, dude? Like we just saw your website. It's like it's killer. Like why are you not in like the design conservatory? So I was like, okay, okay, I guess I'll try it. And mind you, like on the side, I was taking like art classes on the side for credits, right? So at least I had something of a creative side still going and credits that counted towards a degree. So in design. So I applied and I got in. And then on top of that, like my neighbor at the time was also in the graphic design conservatory. So I hung out with her and she just showed me her portfolio and I was like, oh wow, like the posters that she made, these fake concert photos, posters that she made, branding logos, and I got super into it. So she encouraged me and I got in and I was very surprised. And like it wasn't easy, dude. Like I actually didn't want to stick in the same program because it's hard. It was super hard. The professor made people cry. He tore posters off the wall and threw them in the trash.
God.
It was wild, man. Yeah, the first year, second year, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, I stuck to it. And I'm not gonna say I was best in class, but I think I've had a crazy enough career to say that I've had a very interesting design career now because I don't think a lot of people have been able to like leave the States. A lot of them are still in New York, and I'm now out here internationally, and that's like it's rare to see that.
100%. Yeah, no, for sure. So let's go for the career then. So you started out in college, you did all this stuff, robotics, whatnot. You ended up in design. Where do you go from there?
Oh my gosh. Are you talking about my design career and how it started and how where
Yeah.
it went that? Oh man. So okay, I was again one of the very few lucky designers. My senior year, I got an internship working as an animation designer, which I had no skills in whatsoever. I literally self-taught myself on the
Love it.
internship. and then it turned into a full-time job. So I'm not sure what the large media corp is in Australia, but in America it's Comcast, right? So that was the company I worked for as a animation
Right.
design intern for live television, which was stressful. And everyone stresses out about product design timelines. Oh my gosh, like animation, live television design timelines are so intense, like
Yes.
nothing compares. So after it turned into a full-time job, I was there for like a year. And I was like so burned out. But for me, like I learned a lot of like how to handle clients, how to speak up. I think I was still emotionally messed up from like school, and then just like going into a full-time job was very stressful. So I really messed up. I just learned through my failures just of how to communicate, but also, understand my growth area. So I left after a year, and I actually was like, I want to do more web design, right? Right, because that was the thing. I moved to San Francisco. A few agencies I worked at weren't really focused on web, but I eventually landed at a company that's called Words Pictures Ideas. This agency, they did a lot of communication work, branding work, but most importantly, like web work, but also work that was also impactful for the community of San Francisco in terms of like physical things. So the Bay Lights, like I think that's the one I always point to as like a physical embodiment of the work they've done for the city of San Francisco, where it's like 25,000 LED lights on the Bay Bridge. So we worked on that. Everyone's like asking like, what did you work on? I worked on like animation prototypes of what potentially would look like, storytell, right, in the beginning to sell to people. And then eventually we paired up with light artists to get those lights on there. And it's team effort. It wasn't just me, right? So I'm not gonna
You did it
claim
all
that.
by yourself. You climbed the
Yeah, it's
bridge.
all me. Spread the rumors, internet. But no, more credit to the team and people that backed it. I think badass engineers and physical labor. I think it was amazing. And then on top of that, right, I think around the same time, that's when I think the second iPhone or first iPhone came out, or the iPad came out, and that's when everyone was like, "Oh, responsive design, oh, the App Store." So I got very lucky. There weren't like YouTube universities or lynda.com classes on UX. I think the
Yep.
whole Bay Area was just learning what UX design was all about. So I got very lucky in terms of just learning with my engineers on the spot of like what this new technology was, having a space to be able to do that, but also potentially create something like that on the App Store. And then I think Android also came out around that same time. So it was just a cool time for any designer because there was no like gatekeeping, just very free, open, like learning together. Everyone's like messing up together. So I think it was like, yeah, I feel like that was like the golden age of like being UX designer because like there's no judgments. There were no like social influencers right back in the day. And I just got very lucky and learned a lot from there. Then I ended up Twitter, then I went to Yahoo, and I got all that product background from all these companies, right? Just working on product, and it was fun. And I went through a few other companies. Now I'm here in Asia, and I think what's developed or what I've learned is just a lot of the human stuff, the stuff that is so minor, just communicating the language you say, how you say it, even just like the cultural nuances of communicating to people, not being the loudest voice in the room and just being like a team, a collective, is very different internationally versus the West, right? And I think people tend to forget that, these people are human beings, and your voice or your idea isn't going to be the chosen one most of the time. And you can't just yell across the room and assume that your idea is the best idea and it's going to win, right? So I think, and it's weird because some people don't see that. I think if you've worked in Silicon Valley or companies that are, westernized, you'll definitely see like parts of it. And, and for me as a designer, I think I still need to grow in some parts of leadership, but I think I'm gonna get that opportunity in my next gig. So
Ooh, there's a next gig coming up. All
yeah.
right.
I mean that's coming, but can't say much about it right now. But I think it's a very good opportunity for me to grow as a leader. And I think, for career advice for anybody, right? I think it's great to be at a stable job for a long time, but you really want to be challenged and you really want to we want to grow as not just as a person, but also in your career. I think it's the worst to be stuck at a job maybe for 2 years nowadays. But I mean, I get it. If you're a family man, you're gonna stay somewhere for a while. I really like my job. I've been in this job for 5 years. I love everyone here. I think it's just career wise, selfishly for myself. I think I have high aspirations, and that's why I'm doing it.
Nice. Well, that's a pretty good advice, actually, if I'm being honest. It's, you gotta push yourself, right? And especially if
Yeah,
you're, if you're not a family man, like you said, like I have 3 kids. So for me, whenever I'm pushing myself, I have to remember I'm pushing around 3 kids
right,
also with me.
right.
Yeah, it's great to know that you're trying something new after 5 years. It's a long time. It's especially in this industry, right? Um,
Yeah, I didn't realize that recently. Someone said that's like, dude, like, because my past resume, and for most designers' resumes, right, they're usually leaving the company after like a year, 2 years. No one sticks around for like 3 years or 4 years. It's like the uncool thing to do. But then when I start like interviewing at places, right, people like always ask like, "Oh wow, you were there for a while. Like what? Like that's great. You showed that you like invested into the company." I was like, "Yeah, of course, it was invested. Like I did some cool work there, and I love the people there. That doesn't mean that I hate the place. Like there's wonderful.
not.
I think that goes for anyone that's like trying to leave a job that they've been there for like 10 years, right? I think you really need to challenge yourself. That's just my perspective. If of course if you have a family, you have all these other things, yeah, stay there. Stability, because a lot of my friends also have the same issues. Like they do it for the paycheck. They do it because they're invested, and they it's just a stable gig, especially right now. Oh my gosh, it's crazy right now.
It's
Yeah,
true. But I'll say something to the stable part too. It's like you also met, I think, Andre Herasimenchuk on our clubhouses with Chris and,
yeah,
and yourself. Yeah, so Andre worked with me at Booking.com, and he was the first designer in Photoshop. I have an episode with him on the podcast. If you haven't listened, you can go check it out. But one of the things he used to say is like, we are very immediatists, right? We're very now people. We are like everything now, right? So designers are worse at that nowadays, and everything has to be now. And if I join a company and I can't solve the problem now, it's wrong. I just have to leave, right? And one thing that he said that I come to see at, through his lens now, is that, the older I get, or, like the more experienced I get is the right word, I can see that things take time. Like
yeah,
not everything is like join the company, make huge impact. Some things take time to make huge impact, right? So depending on what you're joining, depending on what you're doing, you may need to join and give yourself the time and give yourself the space to actually achieve what you want and to learn and to grow. So the fact that you gave it 5 years, it's also like, well, but that was time you needed to grow and to learn and to
yeah.
find yourself in all these things. So yeah, I look, that's an advice I took from him, and you already gave some advice to people, but I'm gonna ask something different. If you had a
Okay,
time machine, Jay, and you
yeah.
could go back to the beginning of your career, what would be an advice you would give yourself?
Dude, the probably I probably would give my advice. It would be more like a personality advice, where we just pretty much like, hey, listen, everyone communicates differently. And how you interact culturally is gonna be not it's not gonna be well received by everybody. So for you in the future Jay, or past Jay, maybe just be a little bit more patient, be a little bit more generous and kind with your time, and don't be so New Yorker about things. That would be the advice I would give him, because I think uh design work, right? Like I think we're in a good time, we're in an amazing place, but uh to learn skills in design, that's fine. It's the stuff that really makes you tick, the personality, all that stuff, the interactions at the end of the day. Because if you want to be a role model, you gotta have these traits. Unfortunately, that's the thing, right? Like you do there, when you look at leaders, right, there's specific traits that you're like, I want to be like that guy. And I'm not saying it's it doesn't have to be like the typical, how you say, leaders that you see right now. But when I see a leader, like when you see like someone that you want to be, or maybe uh enamor yourself, or maybe be like, you got to take into account how they say things, how they treat people around them. And I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from people, but like I really love Obama. Obama, how he treats people, how he speaks, and nothing again, like there's no politics involved in this. It's just
I
how he
got it.
treats people. There's like that swag, right? Like even when he steps out of the plane, it's just freaking smooth, dude. Like there's this energy, there's this kindness, and there's this type of maturation that you want to have, or for you as a role model, right? And that's someone that I want to be like in general. And I think, you just got to have good role models that you look up to. I think we don't have enough good role models. And I think for me, if I want to be a good role model, like I said, going back to my earlier point, you just got to know those humanistic things and just have a little bit more, I wouldn't say empathy, but more patience in terms of how you interact with different cultures.
Oh, 100%. I love the advice and I love the Obama comp. It's not a bad, it's a really good comp because I think even the way he speaks, there's a patience to it and there's a calmness to it, right? Which I personally cannot replicate. I mean, I can do an impersonation, but I cannot replicate on my day to day. Like I speak fast, I talk fast, I talk with my hands too. It's the Brazilian in me. I can't control like shaking my hands and talking like that. And I can see that you are a fast talker too. So I think that just that idea of like, can you calm down and can you just bring it to a lower place and actually communicate things in a way that people are gonna follow you, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that that's a very interesting way that he does, as compared to many other people we watch talking that are super fast and just very direct and yes, he's a cool dude full of swag, so of course that counts too. Uh, all right, so I'm gonna ask you, like you are from a Filipino background, but you lived in New York and now you've lived in Asia. Have you noticed um, any ways that the culture in the places that you've lived have influenced and shaped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was just talking to my friend from China the other day. I just had dinner with her and we are just catching up. And like I told her, I was like, yeah, like in the West, there's just different ways of communicating and treating people in a relationship or even dating. Like the whole cordial process, completely different in the West. Like it's almost borderline like rated R towards like in Asia. Like they're like some like there's a step process, right? It's a little bit more conservative, right? So I think dating is a big one. I'm probably gonna write a book on that when I get older and when I'm settled down. I have so many crazy dating stories out here that I will not share them on your podcast because I feel
That's
like,
another episode. That's
yeah,
another
that's another
episode.
episode, and I don't want women or the woke mob to kill me because they're gonna be like, "Oh, you're blaming women." I'm not blaming women. Both sides are at you know at fault sometimes. It's just culturally it's a very different game versus like in the West. It's completely different. That dating's a big one. I think that one I've been struggling with for a while. And then another one is just like the house manners and just taking your shoes off, right? Going into the house. Like I we never did that in my household, although I got yelled at a couple of times because my parents are Filipino, right? So that they didn't care as much. It's so like more amplified out here. And I think for the I get it because like I want a clean house. I don't want mud trekked around or dirt, right? It makes sense. And then just trying to think like the food's amazing. Culturally, the food is very different. The taste and how you cook things very different. And for me, right, I actually started cooking a lot of Asian dishes recently because of my background as well, like trying Filipino to Vietnamese, Japanese, and I love it. Like there's such a process about it. It's very different from just like the American like steak, burgers, right, fries, and typical stuff. So yeah, I've just been assimilating. I think for me, I love it. I love being out here. I think I was talking to someone on Clubhouse. They said that they've never seen a designer or a person that's been westernized, or I mean easternized. He comes from a Western background, but then he becomes easternized. So I guess that was his comment. He's never seen someone like me assimilate myself. Although I feel like I'm still Western in a way, but I definitely have become a little bit more collective in my thoughts and how I think about things.
and that's an interesting thing. You mentioned the collective, but I also feel like even the food and the way people cook there and all of that, like, like you were describing, well, the Americanized or the westernized way is the burger, right? And then
Yeah,
you get the Asian way where it's like, well, we cook and there's rice and you're gonna cook something and you're gonna, like it feels like it's a slower culture in a way, right? So that's why also in my head it was like coming from New York, like do you feel like that slowed you down in a way or calmed you
yeah.
down in a way?
I think my calming down happened in California first. Oh my
Got
gosh, it was so
it.
funny. Yeah, when I moved to California, like, not a lot of people know. Maybe I'll educate folks. East Coast is very aggressive. New York, very like cursing, loud. When I moved to California, oh my gosh, also like a not a maybe not a culture shock, but a coastal shock of how everyone was so chill there. So yeah, I just learned to be a little bit more at ease, a little bit more like into nature, chill, the vibes, as they say, catch a vibe, catch some waves. And then when I went to Asia, man, like, yeah, just there's definitely this Buddhist type of influence I've been getting myself into in a way. I'm not going to claim I'm Buddhist, but there are these little principles that, I think about karma and whatnot as well, that I've definitely been influenced by, just by being out here, because I can see it in a lot of things. So yeah, I think it's very fascinating in general of what's happened to me.
Nice, dude. Awesome. All right. I don't want to keep you too long. This is love. We could go all day, as you know from Clubhouse. But but I'm gonna ask you a couple of more so we can wrap it up. Do you see any like what would you say is your superpower? What is the thing they would say like separates Jay from everyone else?
um I think I have a way of connecting people that seems to rise all tides, I think, in a way. So like when, like when the tide comes in, I want to make sure that it raises all boats. So yeah, just for example, like there's two examples. Like I'll go through a personal one and then maybe my connection one. So uh yeah, so one of my friends, he met his wife. Actually, three people met their significant others because of me, which is crazy. So and then
That is
career
crazy.
wise, yeah, right. So and I knew there was a match, so I helped facilitate, and then now they're all married. So that's three people I've gotten hitched in the past 10 years, which is nuts. And then on top of that, for careers, right, I always make sure that I try to give back to people, especially young designers, or people that are struggling in professions that need to, want to get up, right? So I'm a photographer on the side. I actually met this person, this girl, up front at a concert, and she's like, my dream is become a photographer. This is 10 years ago. Okay. So I was like, okay, you contact me when you have a camera, when you're really into it, you want to do it. Uh we stay in contact via email. And then she's like, hey, I'm ready. I have a camera. Like, how do I shoot shows? So I was like, yeah, I'll connect you because I work for this blog. I can get you to shoot the show. You're in LA. Let me connect you with the booker. And then she blew up. She started blowing up after a couple of shows. Her photography is amazing. And now she runs she's a amazing freelance photographer now for the past like 3-4 years, and she's now on tour shooting a bunch of rappers, and she's like literally like famous now. I'm
God.
like, and she even thanked me in her Insta story. She's like, if it wasn't for you or giving me guidance, like I wouldn't have like known to like this world is possible. And there are stories of other like also like designers that have helped out, but not as like significant as that one, because she's like blown up. So I think I want to make sure that I give back, and connect as well to community. She's also Asian American as well. So again, like I want to make sure that I connect people to the opportunities that are there, but I want to make sure that they work for them as well, right? I'm not just gonna be this person that hands out. So I'm skeptical at first, but if you show me that you're passionate, if you show me that you really want to do it, then I will help you try to get there.
Awesome. That's a lovely one. All right, so the final question, the question to end everything. What would you give as advice to the people starting out? Right? You just said like you love help people start, people that are starting out and coming up, and if you had the chance and if you had their ears and everyone's waiting for your, sage advice, what would you tell them?
That a career isn't a straight line, and the money will come when you're, well, how would I say this? The money will come, but you just how comfortable you are with, the value you bring for yourself. I hope that makes sense. So because I think a lot of us, we establish our careers towards wealth. I think for me, right, I did do a lot of unpaid gigs. I did do a lot of free stuff. I also, did some gigs where I didn't get paid well in the beginning, but as I figured out my own space and my own value, right? I started finding like, okay, I want to make this much because I this is how much I value myself right now. Or you start getting like confirmation, right, from all your friends, like, dude, you should be being made this, like you should be making this. And then like, yeah, of course, like you get more confident because I think a lot of people are like that imposter syndrome over the course of time. That's also an issue, right? But I think, once you get to the place where you're comfortable with knowing that you have this value about yourself and what you bring to the table, and it's like what Christo says, right? You want to put down the big number. Don't be afraid because you know what you bring to the table. And people need to just be more confident about that. So aside from the career not being a straight line, right, your value is going to be all over the place. Yes, of course, you have the big cojones and put the big number down if you're that confident, which is awesome, right? You should try. But you gotta mess around to find out. Right? You really gotta mess around. I mean, there's obviously a more inappropriate way to say that, but like I won't say it because it's your podcast. But that's what my guidance would be. Your career is not a straight line, and the value will come once you become more confident in general, especially with the wealth. Because I think a lot of people assume working for a tech company, you're gonna be super wealthy. You're gonna struggle. It's gonna be a lot of up and downs. You're probably gonna work for startups that fail. They're not gonna be well known, but dude, you're gonna get so much experience and wealth out of it that your value is only going to get higher over the course of time when you go through these experiences. So that would be my advice. But before I end, I actually want to ask you a question. So
Oh no.
what was what was going through your mind when I was speaking in Melbourne? Because I'm actually curious. Because like once you figured out it was me, I'm like going back to the earlier conversation we had in this podcast. What was your first like? It's like, who is this guy? And then you heard my
Yeah.
voice, right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it clicked. But like, what were you thinking as I was speaking, as I kept going?
So, well, I wanted to interject right there because I was like, well, it's a clubhouse. I can just start talking, right? I'm gonna be like, yeah, I love this. This is so cool. I'm gonna raise my hand. I'm gonna talk to it now. Sorry. Yeah, besides that, I kind of felt like I know Jay. This is Jay, but I didn't know your story. I didn't know like how you ended up in Asia. I didn't know, your background. So I felt like I want to know more about this. Let's go have a chat. Let's actually talk about this one on one so we can, so we can discuss. I also sent a tweet to Chris. I was like, Chris Toms, Jay is here in front of me. I'm watching him, and so Chris is our special guest in this talk. He's not here, but we're talking about him all the time. So shout out Chris for always
Systems.
being there. We,
Yeah.
but yeah, it felt like for a little second it felt like I should just jump in and start talking. It felt comfortable hearing your story, and I did want to dig in more. I felt like I would wanted to, and funny enough, like we had a group of Atlassians there, right? So you know that I work for Atlassian. We had about 40 Atlassians at the conference,
There were a
which
lot.
was a big number. Yeah, it was a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so we all talked about the conference afterwards. We were all like, well, which talk did you like? And what was the thing that you took away? And a lot of people mentioned your talk, right? And it was super interesting because we were like talking about it went deep enough. It talked about diversity. It gave interesting insights about Asia. And at the same time, people were like, but now I want to know more. And I'm like, you will, because I'm going to ask him on the podcast.
Amazing.
So it
Oh,
was
I'm
really like
happy.
a big loop coming to it. And this is the episode. It's here. It exists. It's not a joke. But no, it was super fun.
Appreciate that. And I appreciate it. Yeah, like I literally like made friends with a bunch of Atlassian folks. So I think they added me on like LinkedIn and Instagram, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So I think I'm gonna be hanging out with a bunch of them when I get to Sydney. So
See, whenever you visit,
yeah,
you now have a team of people to take you out for coffee.
that's
We
right.
can offer we can offer you a tour of the office, but we can't offer you coffee there. We can offer you coffee around town. So
Well, that's great. I think I'll take you up on that offer for sure.
perfect. Well, you're invited, and thank you for joining again, and thank you for being such a good dude to join and participate, even when you weren't expecting it, and the dog wanted to invade the podcast and all that stuff. Thanks a
No
lot, man.
worries. Yeah, you're
All
welcome.
right. Thank you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you next time.